I'm SP from the GonnaGeek.com show, a weekly geek news podcast that is part of the GonnaGeek.com network. Just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other amazing geek shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Whitley, and you're listening to Capes on the Couch.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
We are back with another Creators on the Couch episode, and we are bringing back to the show for the fourth time, the hilarious and fantastic Mr. Jeremy Whitley. Jeremy, thank you so much once again for taking the time to meet with us.
Oh, thank you. I guess one more time and I get a free sandwich, right?
Yeah, we do joke about the Five Timers Club, so we'll get something for you for next go round. But we'll figure out what that is. You get the little punch card, and so yeah, one more you get a free sandwich, or we'll figure something out. So if you haven't gone back and listened to the first 3 times that Jeremy has been on the show, Jeremy was actually our first creator that we ever interviewed on the show way back when. We talked to him about Nadia Van Dyne and Unstoppable Wasp. And then I got to interview him again at New York Comic Con. So we're calling that the second time. And then was about a year ago or earlier this year. I forget exactly whenever it was.
About a year ago.
Yeah. About a year ago for the Dog Night. And he is back because he's got a new original graphic novel that is dropping August 13th. So by the time this episode comes out, it will have been out a couple of weeks already. But the book is called Navigating with You. And it is a fantastic story, and Doc and I are going to get into all of the reasons why it is not just a great story on its own, but how it is very personal to each of us in very different reasons. But first off, Jeremy, man, how have you been? What have you been up to since the Dog Night? Since we talked to you about a year ago?
Oh, working frantically, trying to stay afloat. I had the second volume of School for Extraterrestrial Girls come out. I've been some pony stuff. I've been working on actually the next volume of the Dog Night, which will hopefully be out sometime in 2025. We're working away on that one. Yeah. And then obviously this Navigating with You, but also a lot of other things cooking.
Okay. We talked to enough creators. We know you can't always reveal everything. It hasn't been formally announced by the publisher or for legal reasons, this, that, or the other. But first off, very glad to hear that Volume 2 of The Dog Night is coming out. Something, the follow-up to that universe, please definitely go and listen to that episode. We had a lot of fun with it, and I've got the book somewhere over yonder on my shelf over there. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed that, and definitely looking forward to the next installment in that universe, because I just think it's such a cool idea, and it was just very set up very well. And looking to see the further adventures of the Pantheon, especially the little Batman dog. I forget the name, but
the Yorkshire Terror.
The Yorkshire Terror. That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
So good. The Bark Knight, if you will.
Yeah. I love those characters. I love getting to make all the dog puns, but also I love Frankie, our non-binary protagonist, getting to play around with their world, and we get to see a lot more of that in the next one. So we're sort of getting to see what it means to be the Dog Night, and what kind of stuff they're going to have to actually deal with now that, at the end of the first book, they're officially the Dog Night. Now they have to actually do the hard stuff.
Yeah. You got the origin story out of the way, and now you can really get into the meat of it. So finding out what it means to carry that mantle. And we will certainly bring you back on to talk about Dog Night Volume 2, or whatever the title is going to end up being, or, the Dog Night Returns, or whatever.
It's called Chaos Bites Back.
Okay. Chaos Bites Back.
Nice.
I like it. But we are here to talk Navigating with You, which is another YA story, and specifically the teenage high school age And we've spoken before on the show about how YA is such a catch-all term that really doesn't ultimately mean anything. It's basically just, oh, it's not about grown-ups, then it's YA. It's either for kids or grown-ups or YA, and then very little in between. So this is firmly in the high school age story. The first question I have is, what was the impetus for this particular story?
So I was talking to Maverick, which is part of Mad Cave, about doing something with them. And we wanted to do a romance story that they really wanted to do a romance story that revolved around fandom. And I sort of took that and ran with it. I was like, I'd love to do that. That sounds like a lot of fun. I have a lot of personal experience, I think, from being in comics, of having people come up to my table and be super excited about stuff. They've made all these great, important relationships thanks to this book or that book, Unstoppable Wasp, Princeless, stuff like that, where people have really connected over these things. So it was a great starting point for me. And for me, I was like, all right, from start one, I was like, can it be gay? That's the first thing, is like, if we're doing a YA romance, there's plenty of YA romances out there. I'd like for it to, be a queer story, and I'd like to tell a story with characters that we don't always see in romantic leads. So, specifically from there, I wanted to bring together these two characters of Nisha and Gabby, who are both, young women of color, who both have complicated lives in some ways. They've both moved to the same area in North Carolina from two different places, and each of them have some different stuff that they're dealing with, including, disability. So that was the big thing for me, is I wanted to use some of the information and some of the contacts that I had made making Wasp when it came to disability, including one of the readers I had, working on Wasp, because we had created a character in that who had cerebral palsy. I'd always wanted to do more with that character, but Marvel only has so many things they're actually interested in doing. So I was like, well, if we're doing this romance story, let's do the story we want to do here. Let's bring us back together and do something original and big and fun and different. So I wanted to tell this romance story that circulates around all this fun, nerdy stuff, but also deals with a lot of complex life stuff as well.
Yeah, and it is incredibly well meshed. When you have a situation where you are trying to tie together all of these various components to the story and to the characters, things can either feel heavy-handed because you're focusing too much on it, or you can give it short shrift because there's not enough room and you can only fit so many things into the story. I really think that this is very well balanced in terms of each of the different facets to Nisha and Gabby. And I really appreciated it, like I said, from that perspective. And as Doc and as I was explaining the story to Doc, because to give a little bit of a backstory, I was tweeting about this. I saw, it was about a week prior to this interview, I saw that Jeremy was posting on Twitter. I'm sorry, I refuse to call it by its other name. I know that's dead naming, but in this instance, I'm okay with it. And he was like, I've got this new book coming out and everything. And so I shared it, and then Jeremy and I got to talking, and one thing led to another. So I started chatting with Doc about it last week, and in going over basically the synopsis, Doc and I said, holy smoke, this is us.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're girls, and there's a romance thing, but
right.
There's so much of this that is very personal and very real to just me and Doc and our friendship.
This was incredible to read, because I read the synopsis and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, oh, I can see the parallels. And I do have also on a different angle where this became very personal to me, and the way some of the things that were described, that I'll rip the Band-Aid off. I basically described some of the things that I went through with my own relationship, my own marriage, and things like that. And so I'm like, oh, this is just hitting every level now.
Yeah, because you've got two people that meet in high school, and you have the one person who's very extroverted, and then you have the other person who's like, I'm just kind of doing my thing. And the extrovert is like, no, you're cool. We're going to be friends now, whether you want it or not. And if you can't figure out which is which, then this must be your first episode listening to the show and you have no idea who the hell we are.
Yeah. Says, as the guy with the pseudonym and everything that lets Tony run everything. This hit heavy on that end. And then also when you add in the cerebral palsy part, because my wife has cerebral palsy, and when we first started dating and really started talking, and she talked about some of the things that she went through, and some of the expectations, all these other things. And as I'm reading this book, I'm like, oh my, this hits it. How do I put this? It's not that it is the major point of the story, because it's not, but the fact that it ties in with how she navigates each of the relationships that she's had, and she even goes over in flashbacks like how things have turned out and why she made the decisions she made. And I'm like, my oh my, the psychology behind it is spot on. And I'm just saying, I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I mean that was a big thing for me, because when we were doing Unstoppable Wasp, I created the character of Taina in that, who had cerebral palsy, and it was a sort of thing that, like, she was one of a whole bunch of characters we were introducing at the time. So initially I hadn't gone into sort of great detail as far as figuring things out with all the bits and pieces of how her life worked. And then as we were doing the second volume, I had met a fan of the book who was very excited about being in it and having representation of somebody with cerebral palsy in a comic, who's thanked in the book. And Quaid volunteered to, sort of do some, reading and giving notes on Wasp for me, and help me out with some of the stuff around Taina in the second volume. And I'd always wanted to do more work with Quaid and with Taina, and that didn't always pan out. But in this case, it was a great opportunity to bring somebody in to talk about this stuff. And we had some other consulting with other readers and people who were interested in this, who also have had cerebral palsy and dealt with this stuff. I think the biggest thing that I wanted to make sure of is I didn't want it to be, I mean, obviously it's something that she's been dealing with for, most of her life at this point. So it wasn't something that I wanted to make it about her disability. But I think something that a lot of people who aren't dealing with physical disabilities don't think about is just the thousands of ways that it affects you just on a day-to-day basis. The little things that are different, the things that people say to you, the way that people look at you, the things that people assume about you just day to day, that those people don't even necessarily think about. But there are a million little pinpricks when you're going about your day, and to have those things sort of integrated in there, and then to have some stuff that was specific to some of the people we talked to while working on it. Like one thing that multiple people said to me when they were talking about using wheelchairs is the number of people who would just either push them without asking, would just move the chair with them in it, or people would just use their chair as a prop to hang stuff on or whatever in places just while they were sitting in this chair, just not treat it like it was somebody's only mode of conveyance and an extension of their physical body.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot to it, and in speaking with various people with different disabilities and things of that nature, you can't look at it as, oh, it's a chair, because it's one thing if for those of us that are able-bodied to just rest on the chair, or you lean on the chair, you put something on just a regular four-legged chair. You can't view a wheelchair like that. It is an extension of the person. And so if you wouldn't do it to a person, don't do it to the chair. It was something that I wasn't really aware of. Again, it's the type of thing you just, I hate to say it, but you take stuff for granted like that. But when you talk to the people that don't have those privileges, it becomes quickly apparent just how many assumptions, to your point, a million little pinpricks, just all these different little things. And thank you for acknowledging what I'm going to call, and I'm sure there's another better term for it, but disability tragedy porn, where it's, oh, the woe is me, or the flip side to that is the beautification of caretakers, that you must be, a wonderful person for having to cope with this and whatever. Just stop. can we just stop that? So thank you for acknowledging it without falling victim to it. Like there's nods to it in the story that Nisha talks about, to that point where people, look at her differently, or, in the case of the one thrift shop, she takes advantage of it. The older woman, she's like, oh, I know if I go in there on the crutches, she's going to be like fully intended tripping over herself to help me, with this. And that allows Gabby to go in and get the book. So I appreciated that part of it that, again, you kind of tipped your hat to, and you're like, this is the thing, but we're not going to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wanted to touch on a lot of that stuff. I wanted to show sort of the diversity of the ways in which, both the ways that Nisha's disability affects her, but also the ways she deals with it. It was not something that I wanted to, land on in that disability porn kind of way that you're talking about of oh, poor baby, this and that. It's part of life. It's something she has to deal with. And, I think I wanted to make sure, this is something that I think has been the case with a lot of my friends who are disabled, that like you sort of you show the ways in which people deal day to day with disability differently. I mean, in that, people don't always appear disabled. They don't always use the same ways, things to assist them or the same methods of conveyance. She has braces, but she also, sometimes uses a chair. She sometimes uses the leg braces, but she sometimes uses the arm crutches as well. So it's a variety, and there's, I feel like, enough in there for you to understand what she's doing and why she's doing it. But it isn't something that it was there necessarily for it to be like an educational point for the audience. And it's not a book about teaching people about disability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But the first, in the very beginning of the book, the interaction that she has with the principal, where he is kind of, I guess, the avatar of that mindset of, oh, you don't look disabled, and, or that maybe was another character, but his was the, oh, you're disabled, so I put you in all the remedial classes because you're disabled, so you couldn't possibly be intelligent, and then he backpedals real fast on all of that. And then you have Gabby, who is dealing, with her own grief and PTSD. And Doc, since you're the professional, I'll kind of let you, get into some of that without, again, we're trying not to get into too many spoilers here.
No, it's just, look, the best way I could put it is that there are so many things that are outside of your control in life. And when you add it to things happening at a young age, there's no one right way to handle it. And I don't want to come off as saying like, well, as a doctor, this is what I would recommend. Like, that's not even the point. It's just people need outlets for things when everyone around you, or many people around you, don't seem to even comprehend what it is that's on your mind, or how you can express it in a way that isn't going to push people away. And, being able to connect with others is wonderful. And I'm glad that we see how do I put it? We literally see the growth that happens when you're able to take a step that you didn't think you could take, where you could say, you know what? I, for some reason, think that I'm going to mess everything up and I'm a horrible person and this is all wrong. And, just don't even take the chance. And when someone else literally says like, no, I'm here for you, it really opens up the world, regardless of what's happened in the past. It's not always about what's happened before. It's about who you're with and the relationships you can develop now. So I think that's really what my takeaway was reading through, because I know this is a separate question, but like the fact that much of what they're bonding over is a separate story that isn't really that separate. I think that's really key to all of this. And you have, a person that's been fanboying for a long, long time, or fangirling, sorry for, in terms of gender, but just really into it. And then another person that is also into it, but didn't really appreciate it the same way. And they both eventually just like dive in together. I love everything about that, because sometimes you don't have to know the right things to say, or the right, or just even like how to fix things as they're going wrong. It's just, as long as we're doing it together, we'll be fine. And that, I think, is what I really took away from this. That's it. I'm not getting into specifics of negative events or accidents or all the other stuff. I'm purposely keeping it vague, but it was well enough done that if I had a patient, like an adolescent, I don't usually deal with children, but if I had someone that's even in their, early adult stages, I would recommend something like this because it really does show that nothing has to be perfect at any step. Things can go wrong plenty of times and still be okay.
Yeah, and that has that's the idea of using this book to help somebody getting through other stuff has this nice sort of like dramatic irony to me, as it's also what they're doing in the book is using another, using this book to help them get over these other things that are happening in their lives. It's interesting to me what you were saying, because I feel like part of the challenge of this book is both of them are dealing, as as most people do in high school, with things that are way out of their control and are much bigger than themselves. The in Nisha's case, the divorce and moving of her parents, and the sort of not complete but the sort of loss of her dad, and that he is now further away, and she's, I think, also realizing some things about him and his involvement or lack thereof in her life. And also, Gabby's is a much more severe loss of people in her life and her home as well. Even at the beginning, we find out that she is relocated to North Carolina because her home in Florida was flooded in a hurricane. So she's moved up there with her dad and her brothers, and it was important to me that this be a story where like they get better without things necessarily getting better.
Mhm.
Like the things that often don't change in life, your parents generally don't get back together, and then in fact, like once they're apart, you start to see a lot of the cracks more clearly. And in the case of Gabby's family, like her family's not gonna come back together. That's not a thing that's gonna happen. And Nisha's is not going back to New York, and when she does, it's not the same. you know so it was important to me that things in the world don't get better, but they get better in the way they're dealing with them and feeling about them through their connection and through their relationship.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And the impact that Josh has on Gabby, and I heard of it. I see, just you just his facial expression. He just had like a ooh, kind of look on his face. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it was so real to read some of the things that he was saying, because I have experienced situations like that, like with friends of mine, about partners that have taken that control over somebody and used, you know, negging and emotional manipulation to just keep this person down in one particular place for, for their own ego or control or whatever it is you want to call it.
Yeah.
And just the way that he was so, it was just written so damn well. And then her development over the arc, because of him, he's kind of like one of the instigating things, and then it grows and develops, and just 10/10, no notes. Very well done. I just, I had to say that. So where did you come up with some of the stuff that Josh was going to say and do?
I mean, I feel like we have all experienced, either in our own lives, having one of those relationships, or having had a good friend who's in one of those. And I think like seeing somebody that to be awesome in your life, who to be a great person, who like you're like, people have every reason that they should love this person and treat them well, and then watching their significant other not do so, in fact treat them like garbage, is unfortunately as close to a universal experience as many of us can get. This is an amalgamation of a lot of different people and conversations and friendships, but I think the most specific one is, I have some of the conversation about Gabby's bisexuality is taken directly from my friend Sarah, who had the same issue with her husband at the time when she came out as as bisexual, and her husband had a very like dismissive, no, that's not a thing. Bisexuality doesn't exist stance on things. And the idea of him not only dismissing this entire part of her, but like sending her faux scientific articles that prove that bisexuality is not a thing. It was just so like, it's like I know this guy. I hate this guy. I made an active choice to be far away from them. But it, it's interesting to me because hearing people's reaction to Josh, because the first draft of the story, Josh actually appears in it, is in it a lot more than just sort of we sort of get him through the phone and sort of see his influence in the story as it came out. But like in the original draft, there was a part where Josh came to visit at one point, and like it was too much. It was like too much of a horrible thing. And when it's like you see people like this in real life, and it's like that's horrible. But then when you actually project them in fiction, it just seems so much more horrible that you're like people aren't going to think this is realistic anymore, even though like this is maybe the most realistic part of the story.
Yeah, I think if there's anything the last close to a decade or so has shown us, it's that reality is unrealistic. You can put all this stuff together and then say, if you were writing this as a Hollywood movie or some type of fiction and tried to present this to like an editor or a publisher, they go, no, nobody would buy this. Nobody really acts like this. You're basically, like a mustache twirling villain. You'd have to expect him to have, somebody tied up to the railroad tracks, like a Snidely Whiplash type deal. And yet here we are. So, he's probably sharing, I don't know, Jordan Peterson stuff to Gabby, and
I'm sure. Yeah, he's probably a regular subscriber. It's funny that you say that, because I remember thinking at one point that like when Donald Trump was originally running for president, I was like, it's like somebody mixed up their Superman script. It's like, because the Lex Luthor from Superman the animated series, the Lex Luthor we know now, who's a smart, ruthless businessman, like that guy makes sense running for president. The version we got is much more the like Gene Hackman Lex Luthor, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense that this character would run for president. I don't know.
He's not even Gene Hackman Lex Luthor. He's like Ned Beatty's character of, oh god, what the hell was his name? Come on, Mr. Luthor. Anywho, yeah.
I hear you.
So we're gonna shift a little bit, and this is gonna be way more into Doc's wheelhouse. Super Navigator Nozomi. This story within the story, this Tales of the Black Freighter, within the story. When did you decide to write a manga within a comic, and how hard was it to try to tell this story of the manga into, essentially a handful of pages for each volume?
Oh, that was one of the first things I knew about this book. When we started talking about it, then I was like, they're going to be reading this manga together. I always hate it when movies and TV shows and books are like, it's the best thing ever. It's the most amazing piece of art. It's the best song. You never actually hear it, or it doesn't live up to it. I always despise that. I love the like movie where like a Josie and the Pussycats, where they actually sing. You actually hear their music. They have original songs and stuff like that. Like that's so much better. Scott Pilgrim, things like that, where the music that's important to the story makes it into the story. And that was a thing I knew I wanted to do with this, is to have some of the manga in there. And I wanted it to feel like, when you look at the pages, Casio did the art for both sections, did both the manga and the original comic. And the manga in it, I wanted it to feel really like inky and have a sort of 90s feel to it, of like, this was the manga that for some reason they decided to translate. It's a little weird. It's a little like, there's some creative decisions in there that don't entirely make sense, like the fact that the starships they're flying around in look like steam trains. That her title is Navigator, but she doesn't actually navigate. She fixes an engine. Like that's her whole function, is she's the navigator. You would think she'd be like reading a map or something. And it's like, no, she's, fixing the engine and making sure everything works. She's doing everything but the piloting, basically. And so I wanted it to have that feeling of that like 90s anime that just happened to like break through here in the US, but like was just good enough that like you had read a couple of volumes, but then you couldn't really find the rest of it. They didn't translate it, or it didn't make it, to the store that you went to, and you had to really work to like track down volumes. I wanted it to have that feeling of sort of like half remembered media that I think pre Amazon was very, and pre streaming was very common for a lot of us, of like, oh, I've read all the way to book 4, but I don't know
There's
what
nothing
happens
else.
in the other 4.
Yeah, because there's no way to get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the feeling I wanted it to have, and I wanted to pull that into this and give that sort of like a way to reflect their story in it as well, for them to sort of grow with it and see in a way that is obviously a metaphor, but also very like really what they're dealing with, and it reflected in this sort of sci-fi premise of the comic as well.
Yeah, well, like I said, Doc is way more into the manga, anime, Eastern,
You,
and Eastern
I,
stuff than
right.
I am. So
Well,
I was reading this and I'm going, oh, Doc has got to be living his best life right now with some of this stuff. I don't understand. I get it for the story, but I'm sure that there were like references or tropes or things in there that will go right over my head. But Doc is like, oh my gosh, I've read this
well, no,
this
it's
book
just
before.
Well, no, the idea, as always, is that, okay, you have the original premise of what everything is supposed to look like perfectly, and you get the setup tropes of this is the main character that always gets everything done and is the hero, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, you find out that pretty much the supporting cast is super important. And then once, once the story gets to a point where you realize, oh, I'm sorry, I mistook who is doing what now, as Jeremy already said. Like, it once you get past that, you realize, oh, we're just gonna watch these people deal with some really messed up stuff, and there's gonna be a lot of emotions that come out. And once they start coming out, we're gonna see all of the. And I'm not even talking. And by the way, I'm not even talking about homosexuality versus heterosexuality or anything like that. Just when it comes to especially manga and anime, it's just take what you originally know and throw it away for something that might be better. And I think that's what I get out of it. Like, just take a chance. And yes, there are going to be people that misunderstand it. There are going to be people that even temporarily reject it. But if it's your authentic self, and if you are still trying to do the right thing, even when, and this isn't even a metaphor anymore, when people are literally trying to tell you, okay, I think it's better for you to do something against what is your best wishes or best goals and all that stuff, and you don't care, and you say, I'm going to continue to do what I know is the right thing for me and for the people that I care about. And in some ways it'll work out, in some ways it might not, but I'll take the result and I'll be able to live a better quality of life because of it. So I think that's a great story, no matter how you tell it. I don't care what, what short came from, what, or who gets exposed to it first, but as long as enough people get exposed to it, it's amazing how really quality stuff becomes popular anyway.
Yeah. We make the joke, well, the cream rises to the top.
Macho man.
Yeah. The cream rises. Yeah. Now the other, and this is like a minor thing, when I was reading it, the very first section of the manga that it jumped to, I was like, oh, am I going to have to read this like right to left, or are we no, because I know that's how they're written, is you read them, right to left in the original style. So I as I'm reading through the PDF, it took me like a couple of panels. I was like, okay, where am I supposed to be going? Okay, they're, for the sake of the, this narrative, because it's Western, even though technically it's, the manga within the story, whatever like that, we're going to read it left to right. But I was thrown. I guess I was prepared to, revert. Was that ever a discussion that was had?
Oh, absolutely. My initial pitch for this actually was, when you got to the manga section, it would be printed upside down. So you'd have to turn the whole book over and read right to left. So you'd flip through and then you'd hit the English section again, and it would be you turn it right back over. And that was something that we were talking about almost all the way through up until like we started doing the art for the manga section, and it became clear, like, one, how difficult that was actually going to be from a process perspective, but also that like that wouldn't that wouldn't play at all in a digital format. When we gave people the book either digitally or to review digitally, that it wouldn't make any sense if we put them in there upside down. People wouldn't know what to do with them, but that otherwise they'd be lettered backwards, so they'd have to letter the book and flip it twice. So ultimately, it was just, when it came down to it, it's like that would be a lot of work for not much reward. So I don't know, unless this takes off enough that they can afford to do a special edition where they do all of that backwards and upside down. I don't think that'll happen, but it was absolutely something that was like on my wish list when we started it.
Okay, so I feel a little better then, because like I said, when I was reading this, I was like, okay, are they going to go full bore, or are they going to cheat a little bit? It's like when you're in theater, like you're having a conversation with somebody, but you kind of cheat out a little bit for the sake of the medium. But I wasn't sure how much cheating out there was going to be. But I'm glad that the discussion was at least had for that, because like I said, I was ready. I've done a little bit of manga reading here and there. I've watched some anime. Doc and I have done panels on some stuff at different conventions, and so thanks to him, I have a better appreciation and understanding of the genre and some of the tropes and things. Again, because of Doc. Which again gets back to the point we were talking about earlier, that you get these people that come together and they introduce them to others. I never would have read this stuff or watched these animes if it's, wasn't for my best friend, but here we are.
You're welcome.
No, I sincerely thank you. Here's a question. What was the biggest thing that you either put in the book or you wanted to put in the book that was like just for you? You're like, I'm writing the story. Like, yes, I'm writing the story for lots of people, but I want this in the book, that knowing other people might or might not get it, but you kind of had to have it in the story. Was there like a reference or just like a little thing where you're like, this is, it's like author self-insertion or whatever?
So I set the whole thing in Durham, which is where I live. And it's funny because Cassio, the artist, he lives in Rio de Janeiro. So he has no point of reference for any of this stuff. So I was just sort of like, I want this to be accurate to what Durham looks like. So I was driving around with my daughter, like taking pictures of like random strip malls on the side of the road and, ugly old high schools and things like that, to just sort of like get the feeling of Durham. And we went back and forth. Particularly, there's a scene that takes place at the Durham Farmers Market. And like, that's a real place. You can go there. There's pictures of it online. But like, I wanted to make sure that was in there, and I wanted to make sure like it appeared as itself. So there's lots of little like landmarks that people won't really know unless they're from the area, both that and Duke Park. The thing that's funny to me, that is a joke that I think maybe 4 or 5 people will get when they read it, is that they go to Durham Western High School, which is not a place. There are 2 high schools in Durham named Northern and Southern. So like East and West don't exist. And so like I set this, high school in West Durham, and I called it Western, and they made them the Cowboys because they're Western. Yeah, it's just such a like, there's a little like, it's like half of a joke. And other people don't have the other half to get it, but was a funny thing to me, and I was like, I want to plug that in. It looks, the build of the high school looks exactly like Southern, which is actually close to where I live. And we went and took pictures of sort of the outside of that, which is just basically, it's a big ugly square. So we translated that over and created a new third directional high school in Durham.
Okay, all right. I always appreciate that, because again, we talk to a lot of writers, and we talk to them about either inserting themselves as characters or different aspects of themselves in the characters. You write what you know, certainly to that extent, but it's some of those little details that I really appreciate. And so I know that whenever I'm talking to a writer, I always want to ask about something like that. Like, what did you want to put in? We're like, I'm writing the story for, the mass appeal and hopefully that, it connects with the audience. But this one little thing is just because it makes me laugh. I mean, Doc and I do that all the time when we're writing,
Oh
you
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
episodes and we're writing skits. It's like, yeah, we're gonna, we want to talk about some real stuff. We want to get across the point, but sometimes we got to keep it. We got to keep ourselves entertained with it. So I'm always, interested in those types of things.
It's interesting to me. There's a couple of things in the book. Like she mentions going to a biscuit place at one point, and it originally had the name, like original had the name of the actual local restaurant in Durham in there, but I was like, oh well, that's a trademark thing. We don't want to put that in the book. But it's an actual like biscuit place that's right down the street from where Gabby theoretically lives. Like I have sort of mapped out in my head where both of them live in actual Durham, which is a fun note, I think, as well. But that and they go to a convention towards the end of the book, and the convention, to anybody who's ever like been to it, is very obviously like set, and it's in Atlanta, and it's given the time of year and where it's at, which is it would have to be MomoCon, which I was like, I didn't put the name of it in there because again, copyrighted name of a thing, but like it's right there in downtown Atlanta at the Georgia World Congress Center. So like where they're at when they leave it, they're right out in sort of the Olympic Park in the middle of downtown Atlanta there. So it was interesting to kind of you'll spot a lot of the references to places and where things are in there if you look carefully.
Very cool. Okay. Well, I'll have to go back and check that out. I mean, I've read it obviously, and I have no frame of reference for anything in Atlanta, never having been there, but I will, now that I know, I'm going to go and, do like a
You see in
image
the
search on.
background when they're sitting and talking, there's Atlanta has a Millennium Eye Ferris wheel down there in downtown, and that appears sort of in the background as well as the Olympic Park there in downtown is very distinct because it's almost all brick, and it has little fountains and everything in there, and that's where they're sitting and talking, and the part where they're reading the last book together.
Okay. All right. I was going to say, is there any talk of an adaptation for this? Because I could very easily see this being something, a story that's told in a film, either animated or live action. I mean, has there been any word whatsoever on anything like that?
I would really love that. It's not a conversation we've had with anybody yet. I think once the book is out, I think it's much easier to have those sorts of conversations. But I'm hoping, the early reviews have been really good. We've gotten a couple of great starred reviews, and we've gotten name checked in the New York Times and a couple of other great places. So I'm hoping that's a possibility in the future, and I'm also hoping that we've got a chance to do more stories in this world, because it's not a certain thing yet. We'll have to see how the book does, but I'd absolutely like to come back to Gabby and Nisha and sort of leave it at a point where I think it'd be very easy to pick up and tell more stories.
Yeah, definitely. I would love any and all stories set in this world. And like I said, as I was kind of finishing the book, I was definitely thinking to myself, like, this could very easily be, a teen romance film.
Oh yeah.
Something like I don't know, like a Searchlight Pictures or, A24 type thing where, one of these smaller studios that focus on, telling different stories that aren't the, multi-million-dollar blockbusters, and just really focus on the heart and the relationship and the characters and do it justice. I don't know how you would translate some of the manga sections, to the screen, but, I'm not the director, but like I said, I very clearly, I can almost kind of even see the film poster in my mind. So, fingers crossed this ends up hitting, theaters in like, I don't know, 2027 or something. You can make this film for, on a very small budget. You don't need $100 million for this movie. So, if any of our listeners know anybody in the Hollywood system or know anybody at a film production company, give Jeremy a call, because you got a great story here. And again, I'm not just blowing smoke. We talked during pre-roll. I say this not because we're interviewing you and because you've been on the show. This book really, it hit me, and I cried more than once reading this book. Like, and I was sitting there and when they had their first kiss, I was like, yes, yes. Like I was like, I rooted for them so hard. And there's just so much stuff that they were going through. And by the time it was all done, and I was just like, I want to be their friends. I feel like I know them. They are real people. They are so three-dimensional. And again, it's a credit to you. And I'm not blowing smoke, and I'm not just trying to kiss your ass. This is a fantastic goddamn book. It is.
So I'm going to, once again, without giving away a whole lot, there was a line in there that I've actually just within the past few years been able to say honestly to family members who I know can take it. There was a point in my life where I figured if things aren't going to work out that well, it's okay, and I can just be alone. I don't need anybody in my life, things like that. And then I'm in high school and I meet some really cool people, and I'm glad I met friends and things like that. And I'm not complaining about that. But even then I figured, you know what? These are the type of people that are going to be transient in my life. And I never, I may hear from them a couple other times in my lifetime, and that's it. And then this guy just starts talking to me, and ironically, it was making fun of me at one point. And this is directly related though to this book, because there was a line in there and it was, I really tried hard not to like you, and yet here we are. And that's pretty much the point. Like, and that's the way I have dealt with some of the closest relationships in my life. I thought for some reason I could push people away, and people saw through it. And Tony's one of them. My wife is one of the others, and I am eternally grateful for it. So to see that sort of thing in its own way on pages like this, I didn't really expect that, and it was powerful. So
yep. I was reading that and I was like, well, this is Doc. This is being Doc. Just again, I was like, I don't know how you did it. You turned us into girls, and you gave us a romance, but this is me and Doc. This is us in high school. I don't know how you found it. I don't know how you wrote it, but yeah, again, just really, really powerful stuff.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and it's fun because I think this was also along with the Dog Night has sort of cemented my era of now writing awesome parents in books, because I've written a lot of bad parents and things between Princeless and Raven and School for Extraterrestrial Girls and stuff, and Dog Night was the first book that I had like a mom that I was like, she gets it, she rocks. But then like both of their parents in this, but Nisha's mom especially is like, yeah, she's great. She just buzzes through, checks in on her kid. Do you need anything? No, fine, do your thing. And then also is of course the mom that sort of busts up the quickly becoming a romantic moment in one of the scenes. But it's good parent stuff.
Yep. So I was going to say, we have the question we like to ask towards the end is, any new stories coming up, but you mentioned, you're working on Chaos Bites Back, the second volume of the Dog Night story. I guess to follow up on this, do you have at least an outline or something for maybe the next story in this universe if things go well?
I have a lot of ideas of stuff I'd like to do. I think if we do a sequel to this, I want it to be a similar format, in that this book covers their junior year. I think if we do a sequel, I would like to do something that is their senior year of high school, that follows the two of them as they're going through all the various stuff. So I think it's interesting because the book hunt is sort of what ties everything together in this story, but there's a lot of like just life things that happen along the way in the story that really sort of give it the feeling it has. And I think that would be very similar to what I'd want to do with a second volume, is sort of like have them hit some unexpected roadblocks and challenges and people in their lives that surprise in good and bad ways, because it leaves them off in a place where they're planning the next thing they want to do together, but also it is pretty open.
All right. Okay, very much looking forward to that. So wrapping up here, where can folks find you on social media and and the internet?
So my website is jeremywhitly.com. It's basically just a big portfolio of a bunch of my stuff there. You can also find me online on Twitter and Instagram. I am jrome58, so JROME58. And on Blue Sky and Tumblr, I'm just Jeremy Whitley. And you can find me at either of those places. And also you can listen to my podcast, Progressively Horrified, which we do every week, where every week we watch a scary movie and we talk about the ways in which it is and isn't progressive. And we, sit down and dissect. Basically, we basically, as we say in the podcast, hold horror movies to progressive standards they never agreed to.
Yes, that's right. I remember you mentioning that during the dog night. And I remember Doc being particularly intrigued about that concept. So, I suppose anytime you want to have him on,
Hey,
Yeah,
I'll pitch him as a guest.
absolutely.
So, well, thank you again, Jeremy. Please go and check out Navigating with You. It would be available again by the time this episode drops. It will be available wherever you buy books, whether that's Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop, any place that you could find it. Please definitely go find a copy, check it out. And then, Jeremy, I know we were talking a little bit about some cons that you're doing. What's your con schedule like for the rest of the year, or maybe at least the next couple of months?
Oh, it's insane. So I'm doing FlameCon, which is in New York. I'm going to be at Everfree Northwest, which is a My Little Pony convention up in Seattle. Later this month, I will be at Dragon Con in Atlanta over the holiday weekend. I will be at Madison Comics Expo. I will be at Baltimore Comic Con. And I know for sure I will also be at New York Comic Con in October. So we'll see you there as well.
All right. Well, we submitted a panel application for New York Comic Con, so fingers crossed we will be there. Again, no guarantee that we're going to get it, but we're shooting our shot, and we'll see what happens. That would be absolutely fantastic. And in worst case scenario, I think they're out of the regular just fan passes, so I don't know that I could get in at this point. But if all else fails, maybe I'll see if I can finagle my way into like a press pass or something. But we'll see. We shall see. So, and I'm sure you can find all that on your website, right? Your con schedule.
Yep, on my website or on those various social medias.
All right. Fantastic. And speaking of websites and social medias, you can find all of our episodes on our website, which is capesonthecouch.com. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Threads at Capes on the Couch. And if you like what you hear and you want to get additional access and additional material and early access, you can check out our Patreon. We've got a Discord. You can join a fan community and chat with other Capes on the Couch fans. We talk about not just about the show, but we talk about comic books. We talk about movies, TV, music, memes, mental health, whatever it is that comes to mind. And so, again, thank you so much, Jeremy. We definitely appreciate it. And we will absolutely be reaching out to you in 2025 for, Chaos Bites Back and all of the stuff that you've got coming out. And again, fingers crossed, maybe we get a movie out of this.
Sounds good to me.
I'm rooting for it. 6 seasons in a movie. No, maybe just a movie.
I'd settle for either.
There you go. So, Doc, anything else you want to add?
Nope. I think this is one of those that speaks for itself.
All right, fantastic. So for Jeremy Whitley, for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.